murdered King Osiris was resurrected by his wife Isis and guaranteed the continuity of the Pharaoh kings.
What is up, everybody? Corey James here, super excited for today's video because it is the first of what I hope to be many installments of a brand new video series I call Origins of Truth. Now, in this series we will explore the numerous myths and legends from our ancient past that scholars claim to be nothing more than fantastic allegories, fictional stories, and magical tales, but here's the problem with that. No, it isn't. Myth and the concept of fictional stories are modern day terms used by modern day scholars because in their world, gods, magic, and the supernatural do not exist. But they did to these ancient people. So, what if we explore them as such? Literal accounts of historic events, could we uncover an origin of truth? Now, most of the myths and legends we read about today are really just the latest version of the original story. That's not what we want. We want the source. But since that's pretty much impossible, we want to get as close as humanly possible, so let's get to it. The ancient Egyptians, believed by many to be the most advanced of our ancient civilizations, they also remain one of the most mysterious, with very few facts established and dozens of theories proposed. But for all intensive purposes, we really don't know much about the ancient Egyptians other than the fact they were really big fans of mummification, which actually ties in with our first myth, the myth of the pharaoh god Osiris in the time known as Zep Tepi. So one of the biggest issues when it comes to the ancient Egyptian language is the fact that they have no vowels, which immediately makes finding any origin of truth nearly impossible because the entire basis for the translating of their language incorporates modern dialect and phonetics, which could be correct, but really, how could we know? That being said, these scholars probably know more than me, and most of them seem pretty smart, albeit closed-minded, so we're gonna go ahead and trust them on this one. Rising out of the lifeless waters of chaos called Nu, the Benben, a pyramid-shaped mound, was the first to emerge from the waters, and from the pyramid mound rose a lotus flower, and from the lotus flower rose the sun god Ra, who was the father of Osiris, the first pharaoh of Egypt during a time known as Zep Tepi, the first time or first occasion. Set, the jealous brother of Osiris, desires the throne, so he kills Osiris, dismembering the body and scattering the pieces throughout the land of Egypt. Isis, the sister and wife of Osiris, collects these pieces of her king and using magic puts him back together, at which point Isis is able to briefly breathe life back into Osiris so that he can impregnate her with Horus, the son of Osiris, who eventually kills his uncle, bringing order back to the land of Egypt, ushering in the Golden Age. Now, there are other versions of this so-called myth. However, this is the story that comes from the Pyramid Text, which is the oldest ancient Egyptian religious text dating back to the Old Kingdom around 2400 BC and written in Old Egyptian. These ancient texts were reserved only for the pharaohs and contain no illustrations, so as far as original sources go, this is as close as we're going to get. So now that we have the closest source to the original story, we can investigate certain aspects within the story, starting with the time known as Zep Tepi, the beginning in which Osiris was said to be the first king. This would have had to been a time far in the ancient past, thousands of years before the supposed rise of the Egyptians we know today, so it would be impossible to validate this story, right? The Turin Kings List, also known as the Turin Royal Canon, is an ancient Egyptian papyrus thought to date back to the time of Ramses II during the middle of the New Kingdom or 19th dynasty, more specifically around 1290 BC. This papyrus is a complete list of Egyptian kings and pharaohs that ruled over ancient Egypt up until the 19th dynasty. Now, This king's list is the basis for the chronology of Egypt's rulers up until Ramses II. In other words, the Turin King's List is the document scholars use to determine when each king ruled over Egypt up until and before Ramses II. So I think we can all agree its authenticity and accuracy is the best we are going to find, but how does this help us? This king's list does not just list the kings we learned about in school. It also lists the kings and pharaohs from the time of the God Kings, before the dynasties began over 32,000 years ago.
Some say they came from the stars. Others believe that they flew across the great water when their land sank into the sea.
Making this date even more intriguing is that when you look at a star chart as it pertains to ancient Egypt, there is only one time in the last 100,000 years when the stars align perfectly with the Giza Plateau in accordance with the ancient Egyptian belief, as above, so below. And that time is 36,420 BC. It is on this date we have the dawn of the vernal equinox. The moon is actually a new moon resting just below the horizon, ready to follow the path of the sun. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the largest pyramid of the three, lines up perfectly with the star Alnitak, the largest of the three stars in the Orion's belt, with the remaining stars and pyramids following suit. The Nile River mirrors the Milky Way, the Sphinx perfectly lining up with the constellation Leo, or the lion in the east. And lastly, but probably most fascinating, is the star Sirius, a star associated with the goddess Isis, lines up perfectly with the pyramid of Khenkawai I. However, her actual written title in early ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs reads King's Mother.
And right immediately below that is the vulture, and that means mother.
Mother of the king of Upper and Lower Egypt.
The next sign is a golden falcon.
Follower of Horus.
And then scroll right down through all these wonderful titles.
Overseer of the affairs of the palace. She whose every command is carried out. Daughter of the god's body.
Could this be accurate? Could the pyramids, the Sphinx, and other structures that scatter the Giza Plateau date back to the time known as Zep Tepi? Many theorists and even some scholars say yes, and point to another ancient temple that legend claims resides the head of Osiris. Abydos, one of the oldest cities in ancient Egypt and location of two very important temples, the Temple of El-Kab, a royal necropolis where the earliest pharaohs are buried, and the Temple of Seti I, a large temple complex built by Seti in the 13th century BC to honor the god Osiris. Legend claims that during the construction, Pharaoh Seti I had a dream in which the god Osiris came to him and told him that if he was to dig behind the temple, he would find the tomb of Osiris, in which legend says resides the head of Osiris. So, Seti digs 40 feet into the ground behind the temple and finds the tomb of Osiris. From there, the story ends, but many believe that this is the reason for Seti I dedicating his temple to the god Osiris. Now, for centuries, this story was always believed to be nothing more than a myth until 1902, when archaeologists who were digging behind the Temple of Seti I uncovered a large structure buried under 40 feet of silt and earth. Consisting of granite and sandstone blocks, some weighing upwards of 60 tons. The Osirian, as it is known today, displays an older style of architecture than that of Seti's temple and is more reminiscent of the pyramids and the old style of building, leading many scholars and theorists to ask the question, could this structure be much older than originally believed, maybe even older than the Egyptian civilization itself? Which sounds a little far-fetched, but it is what the myth tells us, and the evidence does support this theory because the Osirian has yet to be fully excavated due to the constant rising and falling of the water within it and the depth at which that water goes, which baffles archaeologists and scientists because it would have been impossible to build this structure in the first place. Well, unless it was built during a time there was no water. Now, at the end of the day, the fact is the ancient Egyptian language, its phonetics and interpretation are all debated among scholars, leading to many different interpretations of their history, including the accuracy of their timeline, which is understandable considering the fact that their language contains no vowels. That being said, the evidence that does exist is fairly compelling, and despite its fantastic nature, brings about some very valid arguments for its validity. The pyramid text, written in Old Egyptian dating back over 4,000 years, containing no illustrations and reserved only for the pharaohs, tells the creation story of the Egyptians. This creation story is actually validated by the Turin Kings List because it is the same document scientists and academics use as the basis for the chronology of the ancient Egyptian civilization and the pharaohs. So, to say that this papyrus is authentic and accurate, but the first 5% is a myth, frankly, makes no sense and is beyond ignorant. The probability of every major structure on the Giza Plateau lining up perfectly with the stars above, perfectly reflecting the beliefs they held in regards to their gods and creation story by coincidence, is beyond astronomical. And this one is less compelling but equally intriguing. The Porta del Paradiso, or the Gates of Paradise, a pair of gilded bronze doors sculpted during the Renaissance in 1425 for the east entrance of the Baptistery of San Giovanni in Florence, Italy. Contained within one of the panels of these doors is an illustration of Noah's Ark from the biblical tale. However, this ark is depicted as a pyramid that looks eerily similar to that of the Great Pyramid at Giza. Of course, this is just my opinion. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. What do you think? How's it going, everybody? Corey James here. I just wanted to say thank you for checking out the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, do the little guy a favor, hit that like button, and while you're at it, do him another favor and hit that subscribe button. Also, let me know what you think about this new video series I'm trying out, Origins of Truth. Is it something you'd like me to continue, and if so, what are some of the myths you'd like me to explore? Once again, guys, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and I'm out.